Throw a wobbly! And welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is a British idiom meaning to become very angry. And there certainly was a lot of that after this weekend's Austrian Grand Prix. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm good. I always love when it's the British idioms because it's just stuff I'd say usually. You know, I'm not a Brit, but it's like it's close enough. There's a lot of shared vocabulary between both of the major British Isles. I'm doing all right. Apologies in advance if I'm a little bit tired or groggy. I just got off a plane across country and in the door of a relative 10 minutes ago. But most importantly, I did remember to bring the Formula One Book of Death. So we will be talking about that later on.
Also joining us, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Doing great. You know, throw a wobbly though is one thing I don't think an Irish person would say. I don't think wobbly is used as idiomatically in Irish speech as English.
That's true. Rob has like some. I mean, Rob's a very intelligent person, but Rob's knowledge of some very idiosyncratic British and Irish stuff is genuinely impressive. He's right. We wouldn't necessarily say that, but I'd understand it just from hearing them shouting it from the other island.
If you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release ad-free versions of the podcast along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on this month, Danny?
We recorded our episode about Overtake, the incredible new anime about Japanese Formula 4. We had a great time watching it. We had a great time talking about it. I had such a great time that I forgot to have a great time uploading it. So apologies. It was supposed to go up over the weekend. I totally whiffed on that. So I'll get it up in the next 24 hours for patrons to enjoy.
Oh,
and a massive
only
thanks
real
to
Madoka.
Nice, there's a reference none of them will get for another 24 hours. And a massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors: Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us podcast, Bunny Fiend, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and Jason Kelly. Thank you all so very much.
Fantastic. I suppose we should also point out that the next patron exclusive episode will be the second half of Overtake. We liked it so much that we're going to do a second episode on it to finish out the that first season.
We liked it so much, and it's very motorsporty. It's not we did Cars one time. We did Red Line is
we did the Stuntman.
We did exactly. This is like there are parts of this where they're explaining what blue flags are like. Yeah, it's deep in the motorsport world. I would highly recommend people checking it out.
Well, speaking of motorsport depth, we have a lot.
Oh boy,
we have a chasm here to dive into, full to the brim of racing stuff to talk about. Because not only do we have a race weekend, we have a sprint race weekend, and then we have a pre-race show for the British Grand Prix. So before we get to that, though, let's run down what happened in Austria. I'm not even going to run down the sprint grid. There is just too much to talk about. I will point out a couple things that happened in sprint qualifying. Charles Leclerc did not set a time. He appeared to stall in the pit lane ahead of the final push lap. Apparently the engine just turned off and he had to reboot the car. So he did get it going again, but did not have enough time to get around and start a lap. I guess I'll do the top three, or maybe first two rows. Max Verstappen on pole, Lando Norris in second, Oscar Piastri third, and George Russell in fourth. Down in 15th place, Logan Sargent. First time he out-qualifies Alex Albon in his career, albeit it is a sprint qualifying session, but take what you can get, I guess. Albon was required to start from the pit lane after his car was modified under parc fermé conditions. But the sprint, Danny, do you want to take us through the start?
Sure. Honestly, nothing really happens at the start. They all get away pretty good. I'll say Lando's start is not as fast as Max's, which is perhaps a theme we've experienced a couple of times. They're all fairly clean through that first turn, and when they get up to the turn 3 at the top of the hill, there looks like there might be a move on is it Russell in fourth?
It's so Sainz, Russell's in fourth, and Sainz gets around him on the outside of turn 4.
Yeah, exactly. He tries it on turn 3, gets a much better exit, and then into turn 4 manages to pull it off.
Yeah, Norris manages to stay with Verstappen with the aid of DRS, and by lap 3 is hassling him, making Verstappen take defensive lines. And then on lap 5, Norris does an epic dive bomb down the inside of turn 3, surprises David Coulthard as he's commentating. Like, he's going to have to, he might do it from like way back. Oh, he's doing it. And he takes the lead from Verstappen. Verstappen, though, sticks with him. And despite Norris having DRS, they come down into turn 4. Norris leaves the door open, and Verstappen dives up the inside to retake the place.
But what's that? What's that other orange thing coming from behind Verstappen? Exactly.
Piastri, yes, takes advantage of Norris's slowing momentum and follows Verstappen through the door, sweeps around the outside of Norris at turn 6, a spot that will prove quite useful for Piastri in the main race. But yeah, we only have 1/3 race distance here in the sprint. A few other things happen. Russell gets Sainz, Ricciardo gets Sargent, Hülkenberg gets Alonso. Norris tries to get Piastri for second place, but that's a no-go. And the result is, of the top 8, the points scoring positions, Max Verstappen wins the sprint, Oscar Piastri 7th, Lando Norris 3rd, George Russell 4th, Carlos Sainz 5th, Lewis Hamilton 6th, Charles Leclerc 7th, and Sergio Perez in 8th place.
Yes, so, I believe Magnussen in the Haas was just outside of the points as well.
That's right.
I think he was in 9th. So there was, the Haas's were having a decent weekend, it seemed, after the sprint. And of course, so were the Red Bulls. I mean, it's their track, but this was very different to the past few weeks. Max definitely seemed to have a racing edge on everyone.
I was surprised how fast Norris fell off Piastri once Piastri got past him. For a second there, I thought, like, are they trying a clever tandem strategy here where Piastri's kept his battery up and Norris is going to drop back to charge again? No, they weren't. It was every man for himself. I don't know. The team dynamics over there are really interesting to me because Piastri carries himself like a good soldier. There's moments he doesn't. We heard him talk about like focusing on keeping a Mercedes behind the other week rather than go ahead of Lando to see what he could get done. But then you have moments like this where it's like there wasn't that much blood in the water, right? Your teammate's fighting for the lead of a sprint race and the door is open and just no hesitation, just tries to get them both. And it damn near did come off. Like, he had a better shot at Max than I was expecting. But I don't know. It's an interesting place that team is at. Like, it feels like this whole he's the journeyman apprentice under Norris who's coming along. I don't know how much that phase feels like we're approaching the expiration date of that fast. Like, I think McLaren might have my favorite driver lineup in terms of like most talent locked down by contract for the near future.
Right.
But also I could see problems there. They seem very evenly matched and it's all good vibes until like they're really racing for stakes, but we're a ways off from that yet.
Yeah, well, the race grid is pretty interesting because at least the first 2 are the same as they were for the sprint, and so we saw how that went. What will the race turn out to be? And in fact, it was almost the same top 3: Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, but Piastri had his time deleted for track limits and will start 7th instead. But let me run down the full grid here. Max Verstappen on pole by more than 4/10 ahead of Lando Norris. George Russell 3rd, Carlos Sainz 4th, Lewis Hamilton 5th, Charles Leclerc in 6th, Oscar Piastri 7th, Sergio Perez 8th, Nico Hülkenberg 9th, and Esteban Ocon in 10th. Daniel Ricciardo in 11th misses out on Q3 by 15 thousandths of a second. Then we've got Magnussen, Gasly, Tsunoda, Alonso in 15th, Albon, Stroll, Bottas, Sargent, and Zhou, who himself was then required to start from the pit lane after modifying his car under parc fermé conditions. And that's how we start the Austrian Grand Prix race. Danny, do you want to take us through it?
Absolutely. Lights out, away they go. Once again, Verstappen gets a good start. Norris, maybe a worse start. That second phase again. He gets it's just those early gears, whatever it is, doesn't have the traction. Bunches everyone up just a little wee bit. And who do we have there? Qualified in 8th position, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Should probably be qualifying higher than that. But that's not going to stop him destruction derbying himself through the entire field for the rest of this lap. The first instance of this is him jumping down the inside of Charles Leclerc, who then takes a little bit of contact with Piastri's rear left as they get around turn 1. Maybe I'm being a little bit unfair with Perez on this one, but as they I guess the issue with Verstappen or with Lando's slow start meant that the Mercedes and Carlos Sainz kind of got bunched together a little bit, and we had this great little fight down to turn 3 between Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. Gave each other plenty of room. In the end, Hamilton managed to retain the position. But the fight down into turn 4, along the top of the hill, you had Perez now basically with a stricken Piastri at this stage, trying to overtake him. Does so on the inside, and then just for good measure, just completely leaves no space for Piastri on the outside of turn 4, and shunts him out onto the gravel, which meant that Charles Leclerc was able to get past him as well. But Leclerc ended up pitting immediately for a new front wing, and did Piastri at that stage also have the tire puncture issue?
I don't think so.
No, I think he was good to go. Sargent ends up stopping pretty early on there as well. A cursed race for him after a good sprint shootout. Now, Hamilton, is this where he gives the position back to Sainz because he goes off? Which is interesting because Mercedes did it voluntarily before the stewards could weigh in. I remember thinking... It was
a couple of laps later. When they basically got the radio message, and then they said he was getting investigated about it. Yeah, sorry. In that instance where they all were bunched up coming into that first turn, Hamilton was basically, I mean, there was contact there as well, but maybe not enough for him to have. He exited off the racing line, and similar to what happens in Barcelona, and ends up gaining an advantage on Sainz, so they didn't like that.
To me, it did feel like one of those things, though, where, because this is going to come up, like this felt to me very similar to something we see later with Max and Lando, but like this was probably even like this was less egregious to me. It was like they ran each other, like Hamilton got run out wide. There wasn't room for him back on the racing line. Traffic was still pretty dense.
That's first lap.
So he held the outside and he kept the position. And then, the second they say they're investigating the incident, Mercedes gets on the radio and is like, just give the position back before the stewards can judge on it. And because they don't want to flirt with the penalty that comes with that if they do. But I am so curious. What our steward, Johnny Herbert, would have ruled.
Was it Johnny Herbert?
It was Johnny Herbert.
Could have been anything. He could have ruled anything. Johnny Herbert might as well spin a roulette wheel.
Yeah. So like I am just. It's one of those things where it would have been a fascinating precedent to sort of nail down early in the race, but because Mercedes doesn't press the issue at that moment. The stewards never get beyond an investigation. They kind of let the matter drop after the position swap. But later, at a more critical phase of the race, we're going to see someone go off and hold position, and things are not resolved promptly.
Well, just to finish off this Hamilton business, he does give that place up to Sainz for that move on lap 1. Around lap 3 is when he does that, moving him back down to 5th. He then, a few laps later, tries to use DRS to get that place back from Sainz, but Sainz holds him off. And just behind them, Piastri still battling Perez. He runs a hair wide at turn 4, but then sweeps to the outside of turn 6, which is not where you often see passing, except if you've watched him do this in the sprint race, and manages to get around Perez for 6th. I thought this was a great move.
Yeah. Good stuff. Much better than what I assume is the next overtake you're going to talk about.
Yeah, the opposite of a great move. Turn 3, Fernando Alonso just dive bombs Zhou. Locks up, collides with him, bounces him off the track, and earns himself a 10-second penalty and 2 points on his license. Racefans.net points out. Sorry, go ahead, Danny.
No, I was playing NASCAR Heat for most of the flight between SFO and Logan Airport.
Nice.
Just this past afternoon, and that was the move I was using for most of my time playing it. I feel bad for Zhou. His car is basically a massive green highlighter. It's very hard to miss it, but somehow Alonso it wasn't bad enough that he shunted him. The fact that he also then hit his wheel, so he just got like spun out, was just.
I will say the one camera angle we get, the first one we got during the race, did look like Alonso just YOLO, just bang, I'm going to use you to sort of a braking assist into the corner, and then I'm just going to keep moving. From the other perspective leading up to the incident, Alonso is like he's lost control of the car a little bit. There's a bit of a lockup, but it's not as egregious as it seemed. But it was still of a piece, I think, with, we didn't talk about this either. Stroll reliably was like getting the better of Alonso throughout this weekend, and there was a bit of a vibe, and between the lines of the commentary teams as well. Checked out Alonso has re-entered the chat, which is so interesting at this juncture, because we know what happens at that point. Like once that momentum doesn't feel like it's happening, and the team's like a little bit in the weeds, and he's starting to get frustrated with like direction, like where's this all headed? Once that guy sort of emotionally divests himself of a stake in what happens with the team or how a race goes, you tend to see some serious shit down the road.
Yeah, he's like your friend who sort of can't hold a relationship for longer than like a year and a half, right? And he starts like downloading the apps again. That gets the wandering eye. I was noticing that as well this weekend. It's I mean, you think about like just how many, where McLaren is at the moment, kind of even where Mercedes is at the moment, and where Aston was at the start of last year. Like, it's just developmentally though, they have been so off the boil. Like the minute engineers started fixing cars, they just dropped back, and that must be very frustrating.
Alpine is rallying. Oh boy. And like starting to have a better car than Aston. Like it is it's the ghosts of racing teams past, man. It's it's not good, but it is kind of funny.
Yeah, speaking of emotional divestment, lap 35 is when we get a great battle between the two Alpines. Gasly behind Ocon, who himself gets by Alonso at turn 1. And then in the following DRS zone, Gasly also gets by Alonso and uses the momentum to pull even with his teammate on the outside as they head into turn 3. Gasly is forced over the curbs and so does not make the pass on that occasion. But lap 41 sees the two of them drag racing down into turn 4. Ocon sweeping across to cover the inside. Gasly going to the outside, manages to keep it together through that long right-hander, and they're still even on the exit, but because the next corner is to the left, Gasly has the inside and takes 8th place. I thought this was great.
And then he gets on the radio and says, "Ciao."
Yes. No way. Did he actually?
Yeah, dude. Yes,
Wow.
like
No love lost.
and it did not feel. It felt like that was for an audience of one.
It was really good hard racing though. Yeah, especially in the midpoint of this race, which I mean, we talk a lot about like, I'm interested in how your Excel spreadsheet deals with this, Drew, when you're rating the races, but this happens a lot in sports. I'm watching the Euros as well at the moment, where you have these games that are absolutely just drab, but then the last 10 minutes are nuts. This race really sagged in the middle, and it wasn't until the sort of the final quarter that things spiced up.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I was watching, and about halfway through, I was like, should I just click over to the extended highlights version on F1 TV and just finish it out there? And after like a minute of watching that, I saw Rob's Discord message pop up that just said, much to discuss. And I thought, okay, I think I'm going to go back and watch the full race.
Oof, I just got there just in time.
Yeah, you did.
Because I'm with you, though. It was like there was a point where MK and I were both sitting there and we looked at each other like, this race feels kind of over. Like nothing is happening. Very processional. The Alpine duel was like a bright spot in an otherwise kind of lackluster race. And then some magic happened with the pit cycles. The last thing on the Alpine duel is it's funny because like it's so fraught between those guys, and I think to an extent, if I were F1, I don't know how much I would love the optics of the fact that now instead of like hopping on the radio directly to Michael Massey. And having team principals state their case, you have these sort of staged whine sessions from the drivers to their engineers. But like, I actually don't think Gasly was. I don't think Ocon was actually at all out of line when he ran Gasly wide. Like, it was an ambitious move from Gasly. Yeah. Coming up out of nowhere. And Ocon had already kind of chosen his line, and Gasly ended up being sent over the curb hard. But like, didn't feel like there was any extra mustard on it. It was just some hard racing. And then later when, the duel was on, Ocon didn't try tricks. Like, he committed to one defensive move and left space. And it was good times. But it always gets shaded with this, vibe of like, teacher, did you see what he did? Why did he do that? Yeah. And it'll just never be clean between those drivers. Like, I think the Monaco thing puts paid to any notion that they can ever be remotely normal about anything that happens with them on a track. But it was a good fight, and Gasly was clearly very pleased to come out ahead and like leave Ocon behind, perhaps in a few senses.
Yeah. The last thing I have here before we get to the big chunk is that Piastri gets by Hamilton on the inside of turn 3 for third place. Just sitting there waiting for the podium position. And that, I think, is where we are going to take a break, and we will be right back with the end of the Austrian Grand Prix. All right, folks. Lap 52, Verstappen and Norris both pit. Verstappen's rear left is slow to come off, which causes him to have to be held even longer in his pit box to let Norris enter his, resulting in a 6.5 second stop while Norris gets a 2.9. Verstappen still comes out ahead, but he is on used tires. Yeah. Norris is on new ones, and Verstappen locks up into turn 4. All told, this reduces Verstappen's lead from about 7 seconds to 1.7. So by lap 55, Norris has closed the DRS range, and they come down into turn 3, where Norris passed Verstappen in the sprint. This time, Verstappen defends the inside line and keeps the place. 4 laps later, Norris tries again. This time, he does get the inside line, but he locks his tires trying to stop and ends up going off track, gaining the lead, but he has to cede the place since it was gained off track. And at this stage, Norris is also complaining of Verstappen moving in the braking zone after Norris has moved, which is a no-no. So
on the previous one, I think on the lap 55 one, I think.
Okay.
Right.
He started complaining from the first, from
Yeah.
the very first attempt. He's on the radio. Do you want to go through the rest of the duel, or do we want to start?
Yeah,
about
maybe
the
let's
duel
maybe
at this
let's
point?
do it.
Okay.
And we can relitigate them backwards from there.
Okay. So the other thing that's happening at this time is Norris is also busting track limits. He gets a black and white flag. So one more trip outside the white lines, and he gets a penalty, a time penalty. Things heat up again on lap 63 when Norris dives from way back to the inside of turn 3 again. This time it is Verstappen's turn to go off track, and he stays ahead. Norris immediately on the radio saying that Verstappen has to give up the position because he kept it by going off track. The commentator Alex Jakes on F1 TV surmised that if Verstappen doesn't give that place back, he could get a 5-second penalty, which with a 5-second penalty for track limits from Norris would offset each other. But set that aside. Lap 64, Norris is attacking once again, this time to the outside of turn 3. And as they're coming to the corner, Verstappen moves to the outside and they make contact. Verstappen's rear left and Norris's rear right. Verstappen is immediately compromised, has to limp to the pits on 3 wheels. It does take a little longer to realize it, but Norris also has a puncture and he ends up retiring due to the damage. Norris did get a 5-second penalty for track limits. Verstappen's team neglected to tell him that Norris was under investigation, but Verstappen did know that Norris had gone off the track a number of times. Verstappen was handed a 10-second penalty for causing a collision. He pits and rejoins the race in 8th.
All
Do you
right.
want to just finish off the race there, or do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, let's finish. Let's talk about it now, just because it's
Okay.
I'm bubbling, and I see Rob is
all
bubbling
right.
too to talk
Do
about
it.
these
Do
things.
it.
There's a lot here, right? Because when you're entering this discussion, what we're talking about is the thing that I think we talked about maybe at the start of the season, which is that the 2021 Verstappen we haven't had to see for the past couple of years because the margin between that Red Bull and the other cars has been so great that he hasn't had to throw the elbows out like he felt like he had to do against Hamilton in that championship winning season. With that said, people know how Max races and how Max defends. So I'm not surprised in a way that Norris was on the blower immediately when Max made that. It's a late move. Was it such an egregious block? Not really. It wasn't a double move. I think over the years I've been more critical of Max than probably most other drivers when it comes to this sort of stuff. In a way, I felt like this was just, I don't know. It didn't seem that much of a big deal to me, the first one at least.
No, I'm with you. I think there is the first one, seeing it live, I thought, like, I rolled my eyes when Norris got on the radio because it was like, yeah, that's called making the car wide. Like, that was a defense. Now, watching it in replay, it is clear actually he does like track Norris a little more in the rear view than I initially thought. He is like sort of reacting in the braking zone. I think I end up in this weird place where I don't know. It's. I think just hanging over all of this for me to some extent is like I just don't love how much this turns into people running to the rule book, and trying to like split hairs about really fast dynamic situations in racing that by a lot of standards, by a lot of F1 and other racing series duels you've seen over the years, like. Very little that's that remarkable happens here, and so I think that first move where he's like, kind of he's sort of cutting off the line that Norris wants to use. I just didn't find that remarkable in the slightest, and I thought it was some pretty weak shit for Lando to get on the radio. I think that's the other thing too, is like, this is going to require maximum concentration. Like, you're in a fight for the lead of a Grand Prix. There is a little bit of like, I don't know, maybe like just stay off the radio and like figure out how to get this done. Don't go running a teacher. Like just go deal with this business. And that first set of radio, that first radio transmission didn't sit right with me. I didn't think much of the move. But then stuff keeps happening. And like you get back into body of work conversations about Max.
Yeah.
And even in this duel, there's a body of work that develops that you end up in a position where it's like there's nothing as egregious as some of the shit you saw in 2021. Like, just I do not think, there was some wild stuff we saw in 2021 from Max. I don't think a lot of the stuff here rises to that level, but it's all in the context of that. And lap after lap, he keeps sort of pushing the limits harder and harder. And I think it does cross the line somewhere.
Yeah, the lap 59 incident with Norris's dive bomb, that's a pretty easy one to discuss because he just locks up and doesn't stick it. Like, I think, Hamilton is really good under braking there of making sure the wheels don't lock, and I think this was an example of even, I feel like going uphill as well, you probably have a little bit more of a range there when it comes to the braking zone, but even still, he just couldn't get it to stick. And I think GP was on the radio with Max afterwards, and they were talking about like dive bombing and like how that really irritated me because there was a real sort of look down your nose at like the attempt to do it. Let's be honest, Max Verstappen over the years, and this is me litigating the past, has sort of established that oftentimes when the cars are driving this fast, the only way you can get past him and the only way he can get past anyone else is by dive bombing. It's kind of a problem with these cars. So I thought that was particularly like snide, and the sort of the sort of Red Bull thing that does exist of like the holier than thou, we're better than everyone else thing, which, it was a fair attempt. He didn't make it stick. But
well, it's always their annoying little like pretense that they're like the masters of true racecraft. And, again, go back to 2021, it's Christian getting on the radio. Everyone knows you don't try to overtake that corner. Shut up, dude.
Right,
like,
just complete nonsense. Completely made up nonsense. Yeah.
Let's see your game tape. But
yeah, do you remember that great Brundle thing? There's a great interaction between. Oh, there's a fantastic track walk interaction between Brundle and Christian Horner, where they're at some new race. I don't know where it is, Jeddah or somewhere before, and Horner says to Brundle, "Oh, it's a shame, it's a shame you're so old. I bet you'd love to have a drive around here." And Brundle says back to him, and he says, "Yeah, it was a shame you were so slow and you couldn't make it into Formula One."
Jesus. Oh man, we are not friends like that. Yeah, like I think that also I feel like is the dive bomb concept getting a little watered down here. I always thought dive bombing is what happens in like open public matchmaking online racing, right? Where it's like
right.
You're trying the inside pass, but you don't have the craft, you just don't give a shit. And you're just gonna like, oh, you're gonna try to make that corner? I'm just gonna hit you broadside then. I don't care. Like that to me is what like dive bombing feels like. I'm not sure that any attempt up the inside using late braking is something I want to qualify as like, oh, that's just a total dive bomb. Yeah, that's an overtake. That's like one of the most basic, like that's your sort of like, racing 101, like this guy's going to stay on the optimal racing line. You're going to have to go to that inside line. And now it's all classified as like dive bombing, and that feels like it's just of a part with like running to the ref and being like, do you see what he did? That was a dive bomb. It's like, I don't think it is. Maybe if we're gonna say like, well, there's dive bombing and there's kamikaze attack. Okay, maybe, but to me, I always felt like dive bombing was like sort of reference to the sort of a heedlessness to it. But just taking the inside line and like breaking inside someone is not.
Yeah,
it's not outside
it's
the
making
lines.
up a rule to break. It's making up that this is a rule that the word dive bomb does not exist anywhere, I'm sure, in the F1 rule book. So it's like it's creating a fake rule that has been broken, like that's against the spirit of racing, which is complete nonsense. And then what do we make of lap 63? Because to me, this is the apex of the whole thing. Of all of the three or so overtake attempts we've seen before, because this is Lando going down the inside again, making it stick this time, and this is whoever in Austria decided to put gravel on those two last turns for this weekend. This is where they should have put the gravel, because Verstappen, he's a smart driver. But he basically realizes Lando's overtaken him and is like, all right, I'm just going to drive off the track. I'm not going to brake to try and get back on the racing line. I'm going to drive before the curb up onto that piece of escape tarmac. I'm going to drive the entire length of it, and I'm going to come on right before the grass hits.
Yep.
And that's like...
to retain the position. Yeah.
To retain the position. And like, if you're going to go on the radio and complain about racecraft being fair and dive bombing, then what do you call that?
Well,
like,
and
that
Norris gave the
100%.
position back when he overcooked it. He gave the position back before the end of that straight.
Right.
And then for Max to do this is really annoying. Like, and this is where the stewards were running behind on covering this. Like, you were starting to get notifications, they're investigating stuff. Like, it was happening too fast. It's a short lap, but at the same time, this was such a again, we saw this incident investigated promptly. We saw people acknowledging you can't do that exact thing here and pick up or hold a position just by going off and flooring it. And Max does exactly that. And nothing happens. Nothing was ever assessed. They ended up assessing a penalty for the terminal incident, but this one didn't get. I don't think they did anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know if that would, the 10-second penalty superseded the other one or what, but I imagine that if Verstappen would say, well, he pushed me off. But I think you're right. If so I've got two things here. If Verstappen goes off to retain the position, either he's going to be, I would expect it would be unusual for him not to be handed a time penalty there, because just like Hamilton was about to, he gave the place back. Norris would have been, he gave the place back. Verstappen doesn't seem like the guy to give the place back, but he might have been handed a time penalty as a result. The thing that he has done in the past is just speed away and get 5 seconds on everybody so that when the 5-second penalty is applied, he's still in first place. Would that have happened here? I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of a moot point because the two do collide, and that one is pretty much a slam dunk for Max, because Norris is not moving and Max moves into him
Twice. He makes the one defensive move and then reels it back to go the other way. It's like, and I feel like it didn't happen in a corner. I feel like he also weaved on a straight a little bit at some point in this duel. I remember noting there was a couple a double move type situation, but yeah, it's. I'll also say, in that one where Max goes off, my initial thought was he did, that he got pushed wide and then he had to evade Norris. But if you see it from the top of the hill angle, man, Norris is very close to the inside. Max has a ton of room outside. He gets beat to the apex, and Norris is across the line that Max wants to use. That's where he goes off. But he isn't pushed. There's actually quite a bit of daylight between the two
unforgivable.
Cars.
It's such, you can tell he's made the decision early because he turns off even before the rumble strips on the outside of that turn.
If you're pushed, you go over the curb hard.
Yeah, it's so black and white that, because and presumably he was thinking he's going to try that again. What's my way out of this? And then you must put yourself in Lando's position, who's like, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to overtake this person without he's just going to try and bend the rules or break. I can see why he gets frustrated. And then the final turn is just the final crash is just a weird little communication breakdown. I don't know. Verstappen defends on the inside. Lando doesn't even ever make the move to the inside, actually. He's just coming up behind him in the middle of the track. He does that. Lando goes around to the left side, and then Verstappen just I don't know, just drifts into him. It was almost like a Sergio Perez move where he slowly drifts into people by accident and hits their front left or whatever. It was one of those. I think, honestly, the damage that happened was probably... These cars have been very resilient over the past few years. We've seen a lot of like wheel-on-wheel smashes and a lot of like bits and bobs, but I don't know. I guess a front wing going uphill into a wheel maybe tears it asunder, but Max's rear left was gone instant. Like it just completely was, destroyed. But it seemed like a lot for the contact there was, but it was maybe just an expression of just what an odd contact it was, and it was Max's fault. This one seemed more like a mistake than aggression, though. I don't know.
I think the problem for me is, to me, it's not the drift over to the left really is the worst part. It is the fact that he guesses wrong. He cuts off the inside, and then he starts like swinging back left real fast to try to run Lando out of room. And it's like it's the double move thing again. It's like you committed to your angle in the braking zone, and you clearly got it wrong, and you're trying to like cover up that mistake by just like cutting across Lando's nose there. And the thing that I think Max is counting on is that Lando's going to let it go. But at this point, I think Lando is, to Danny's point, he's realized like this is just not going to get done unless the issue is really forced here. And so he sees that like vanishing wedge of daylight, and he just goes for it on the outside. And yeah, once you get two cars, sets of wheels like sort of interleaved like that, it's real unlikely you're going to get out of it without something pretty gnarly happening to someone. But yeah, it felt like it's just kind of a weird thing. It's a weird incident. It's kind of unnecessary because Lando coming into even as the duel started, he was already in trouble on track limits. It's like a player in the NBA being on 5 fouls, right? It's like somebody probably should have tipped like Max to the dunes that one, even before, just as context to begin. Like Norris was out of mulligans.
I think he did know to some degree that Norris was working on some. He did not know that he was under investigation.
Yeah, it's true. He did know because he was also he was commenting on it a bit. But yeah, it was kind of a necessary thing. But at the very least, I think the Norris track limits thing, and then the stuff, particularly Max retaining the position after going wide, should have at least canceled out. But yeah, the actual like incident is just, I think Max triggers it by being sloppy, with trying to cover up the tactical error he made slightly earlier, on corner entry, and it causes this issue. And I think the other frustrating thing that causes the discourse around Max stuff to go from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye is he does keep getting away with it. Like, in terms of like who bears the consequences for this, Max loses a race win. What's a race win to Max at this point? Like, everyone liked winning Grand Prix, of course, but he still bags decent points here. And Norris loses the car, as he points out in the post race. The shredded tire just turns into a flail and just rips the car apart. He loses all his points, and he loses what could have been a race win. I don't think he drove. I think it's also a case where maybe it's the car just didn't quite have it. I'm also not sure he did execute the pass one time, but I just think overall it's like I'm not coming away from this being like what a stunning performance of like tactical acumen comes to such a sad end. I don't come away from this feeling like Lando put on a lights out performance and it was kind of stolen from him by like bad racecraft. I think I don't think the job was as neatly done as it could have been. Yeah. But he did do it at least once and should have gotten the position for it. So.
Yeah, I think where I'm landing on this is that I think Verstappen has the racecraft he's allowed to have. I think water is flowing downhill here. Yeah. Like the drivers maximize every bit of leeway that they can, and Max is really good at it. In fact, this is kind of illuminating quotes here after the race. He is being asked about like moving in the braking zone or whatever. Let's see. I know, of course, that in the past, that's always been a bit of a complaint. But now I always move my wheel before I brake. And then, of course, you brake in a straight line trajectory or whatever. So that's always easy to say from the outside that I was moving under braking. But I think the guy in the car knows best what he's doing. So, I mean, he may be stretching the truth there. Telemetry is a very, would say that in black and white, whether he was turning and braking at the same time. But I think this just, he was pinged, he was roasted for something. He has changed his behavior, but only to the letter of the law, right? And so I think my ultimate frustration here, and it is frustrating seeing these guys kind of trip over each other, and it doesn't look good. This doesn't look like good racing. It just looks like fumbly and careless. And I think my frustration falls not on Verstappen himself, because again, he's exploiting what the rules look like.
See, there's the one part of this that I don't fully agree with. A duel ending with two cars just flying apart in pieces and drivers limping back to the pits. That is not a fail state for me. Like, racing goes that way sometimes. Like, some of the best racing duels I've ever seen end in tears, right? That is just the nature of the beast. And I think that is the other part of this discourse. I think I think leaves me behind a little bit, or leaves me cold, is this notion that, like, well, in F1, this is not how it should end. This should be the standard should be higher. And I think the problem is, like, you're gonna have guys going for it, and because they're good enough, they're gonna cancel out a lot of the easy overtakes. It's just gonna, like, eventually someone's gonna have to try to force the issue with a lower percentage play, and it's sometimes gonna break bad. But I don't view that as necessarily like a bad outcome or a black eye for the sport. It is just like sometimes it's gonna go that way. I think my frustration here is it actually kind of did get handled cleanly at a certain point. Like, for me, I think, like with Danny, I think for Danny it also centers on actually where Max goes off. A lot of the other stuff, I'm like, it's kind of borderline. Yeah. I think where the sport lets itself down is that, like, Lando did it. He did the thing on one attempt, and nobody enforced the rule on Max.
Yeah.
And that is where like it is now, you're basically telling drivers, all right, you know that thing you shouldn't do? Well, you might as well try it, because it's not going to get done any other way. But I do think, like, I love this shit. Like, in terms of, like, having this big duel and having it all end in, like, a retirement and someone pitting with a broken ass car. This is good stuff, and crucially, finally gives us also, like, some of the stuff that makes racing compelling is, like, once two guys start to build up a history with each other, where it's like, I feel you didn't race me cleanly. I think that stuff's kind of good for the sport in some ways. This is kind of the weird thing, is like,
yeah, it can be, but I hated the fact that after the race it was all about, oh, your best friends, are you going to talk about it? Like, this instant soap operification of the whole thing. I know we can't avoid it, and that's half the joy of the sport, but I think there's a conversation. Sorry, what I want to say is probably a conversation for another day, because we have so much here. But I do think the only one I have an issue in is the lap 63 thing, and to me that is a byproduct of, I think, what happened in 2021 is that for the longest time, the conversation, especially in the latter half, or what happened at Jeddah, where he basically, like, went off track, took the position, was forced to give it back, Hamilton crashed into the back of him. Between that stuff, between the overtake at Silverstone, all of these different instances, there was this whole thing of Max being overly aggressive in both defending and attacking, going off track limits, all that sort of stuff. When the 2021 season ended, it was all about no Michael, no. And we all forgot about it. And then the next year, it was a moot point because Verstappen and Red Bull were so far ahead. I think in some way we did not reconcile and deal with that thing. And now, to some extent, we have certain drivers who think you can do this type of thing and then complain about it on the radio. And I'm with you. I think the minute that happened, that lap 63 overtake that Lando pulled off, they should have, as quickly as possible. It should have just been known by everyone. You can't do that. The only problem is the only person who does that type of thing in particular is Verstappen. Hamilton did it earlier in the race cleanly and gave it back. Verstappen did it cynically and didn't. And I think that is the difference between the two of those drivers.
All right, well, let's finish this one off here. Those two collide. Toto Wolff sees this and immediately radios George Russell, who's running in third. George, we can win this. However, Wolff failed to check where George was on track, and he happened to be in a critical braking zone. So when Wolff's message blasted into his ear, George said after the race that it almost made him crash.
Toto just wants to be a character on in F1 again, and he's like, "Oh, it's my moment to shine. I can say something again."
Also at this time, Piastri has closed up to Sainz, and at turn 4 does a cutback to swing around to the outside of turn 6, just like he did with Perez, and takes second place. But as we come over the line, George Russell gets his second win of his career. Second place, Oscar Piastri. Third place, Carlos Sainz. Fourth place, Lewis Hamilton. And then in fifth place, Max Verstappen. His 10-second penalty did not change his position because Nico Hülkenberg, sixth place, was too far behind. We didn't see this, but Perez was chasing Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
And on the penultimate lap, Hülkenberg ran wide, allowing Perez to slip through at turn 3. But then on the final lap, Hülkenberg got DRS and retook the place into turn 4, earning himself a total of 8 championship points, 6th place, certainly his best finish of the year, maybe his best finish with Haas. Rest of the top 10 here, we got Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen, double points for Haas here, Daniel Ricciardo in 9th, and Pierre Gasly in 10th. Behind him, we've got Leclerc, Ocon, Stroll, Tsunoda, Albon in 15th, then Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Fernando Alonso, and Logan Sargent, with Lando Norris, a DNF. Wow. All right. That was Austria, everyone. We got some news here real quick to run down before we get to the pre-race for Silverstone. Some driver news. Pierre Gasly confirmed for 2025 and potentially 2026, a multi-year extension. Also extending with their team, Lance Stroll. Big surprise here. The quote from his team was, "He's renewed for 2025 and beyond." Not a surprise,
cool.
since his dad owns the team.
Exactly. They've just written him into the will. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. A couple drivers who are up in the air. Ricciardo, we now have heard that from Red Bull that they plan to choose over the summer break, which, let's see, when is that? That is after Belgium, July 28th. So between July 28th and August 25th is when they will be deliberating on that. Apparently between Ricciardo and Lawson, Liam Lawson, for 2025.
Did you hear some of the Helmut Marko stuff coming out this weekend about this?
Oh, I just saw some headlines.
Oh, he was talking about how the Christian Horner experiment has failed, aka putting Daniel in that seat. Apparently, it's this is part of the frustrations between Marko and Horner is down to the fact that Helmut Marko used to be the one who'd make those calls, and he's been losing his authority within the Red Bull organization. So he's pinning this one entirely on Horner, and he has said there was a story out of somewhere over the weekend where he was basically saying that Lawson will have a spot on the grid next year. So that seems to be the internal politicking at the moment. is there, and I don't know if it does get resolved in the summer break, but yeah, it was wild to see some of this stuff coming out over the weekend.
You know, I would if Helmut Marko was in a crosswalk in front of me, I don't know what I'd do. Like, I do not like, to a degree. I think they're both really egotistical, grating guys in a lot of ways. And Helmut Marko running this Hunger Games for open wheel drivers for decades is just incredible. But I do kind of see his point here, because if you look at it in terms of, I just can't find, like, Red Bull just can't get anyone good in the second seat. Helmut Marko and Franz Tost's Franz Tost's driver pipeline did the job. Like, half the grid is their products that's out there. But it never worked out at Red Bull. For it begins to look like we get these guys pretty much ready to go, and then, like, damn, it's just the pressure cooker at the big team. It doesn't work out. Now, Helmut's been a part of that, like throwing people under the bus right and left. But I do kind of feel like there is a sense of, we've produced a lot of, like, perfectly credible F1 drivers, and man, the decision to dip back into Ricardo, hasn't panned out. It does kind of feel like anytime they're talking about summer break decisions, maybe it's already done, but he didn't have a bad weekend.
No, he almost got to Q3, and he got points. The door may be closing for Sainz at Williams, is the headline at Autosport. We had been talking earlier that Sainz is under consideration from both Williams and Sauber, which is going to turn into Audi in 2026. Apparently, he has asked for more time from Williams because Alpine has now entered the picture, and wants more time to weigh things up.
Flavio does have the mandate of heaven.
It's to me, this is like, if this was a teen movie, this is the kid who he's like waiting for the perfect prom date, and he's just going to end up going on his own if he keeps this up any longer.
Oh man, one-man Formula One team. Like our overtake friends.
Yes, exactly.
Just a white car, no sponsors. So that door seems, everyone is getting impatient. It seems with Sainz. He, I think, has said that not during the triple header that we're in the middle of will he announce something, but perhaps soon after the British Grand Prix. Who knows? Some other driver news here. Verstappen confirms that he will be driving for Red Bull in 2025. Weird that it took him that long to say that, but Mercedes was understood to. Well, Toto Wolff at least was saying things that, like they were courting Verstappen, and how close that really was, who knows. They have also said now that they are going to take as long as possible to make a decision on their second seat, the one being vacated by Lewis Hamilton for next year, because I imagine that they're waiting to see how Kimi Antonelli, the Formula 2 driver, does in his F2 campaign. So that is all what's up with the driver news. Danny, one more driver item here.
Sure, yeah. Sonoda got a €4,000 fine.
40.
Half of 40,000. Sorry, 4,000. He has 4,000 euro worth of breakfast, that man does, because of Formula One. No, he basically said, and let's call it an ableist slur over the radio. Half of the fine was suspended. Apparently, this coming from racefans.net during the meeting with the stewards. During the hearing, the driver was very apologetic and explained that because English is not his first language, he was unaware until after the session what the meaning of the words used in the English language. He said that he was horrified when he learned this. He contended that his understanding of the words was different, but acknowledged that this should not be considered as an excuse for what he did. So there you go. He said a bad word. He didn't mean to say it.
And they jumped on him.
20,000. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't be saying that over.
I believe they cited a specific rule in the regulations as well.
Well, it's I wonder what. Yeah, because it's not technically a curse word, I don't think, but. I mean, they don't seem to mind when they curse, so
no. But slurs exist in different space, and
exactly.
And I think this one especially, they got to crack down on. It's the the R slur.
Yes,
and I think just given the demographic of who's racing and like the online spaces they hang out, like you got to crack down on that one hard if you're F1, because if you adopt a lenient attitude about that, you're going to be hearing that shit all the time. You do not want F1 team radio sounding like voice comms during a battlefield match or something.
No,
you do
absolutely.
You don't want that shit.
Article 12.2.1K of the International Sporting Code, the FIA International Sporting Code, forbids, quote, any misconduct.
Wow, that is broad.
Yeah. I wonder what effect the Mazepin stuff had on this. I think it'd be cynical to say nothing, but who knows?
He's racing again.
Any misconduct, either being a sex pest or invading a sovereign nation. And everything in between.
Rob, what's this last one between, speaking of, I don't know, misconduct?
Yeah, so it's very petty. It's also very funny.
Yeah.
So apparently, Jos was
Verstappen.
So Jos Verstappen was apparently invited to drive like a vintage Grand Prix car at Austria this weekend. And then he says Horner basically like vetoed that idea and said like, we're not letting Jos go out there and run in this little vintage driver parade. Horner denies this is the case. He's like, I don't have anything to do with that race. Like this is just, the quote he says here at the end of the Race Fans article is, the Legends Parade is something organized by the circuit. There was no veto from my side or anything like that. I've never had an issue with any of our drivers' fathers in the past, and whatever Jos's issues are, I've really got nothing to comment on. Max at this point is left in the middle of this, having to sort of speak on this bullshit.
Be the adult in this situation.
This is the one thing, like, am I happy with his racecraft during all this? No, not a great weekend from the racecraft standpoint, but my God, the degree to which he is having to, like, negotiate another fucked up professional marriage basically around him it sucks. Like he was talking about, it's an unfortunate situation. It's not nice for anyone involved. And he stopped short of like fully co-signing with his dad's version of the story. He said, my dad has been quite clear about the reasons behind it. And of course I can understand his opinion on that because at the end of the day, he gets asked to drive the car and finds out he has not wanted to drive the car. My dad actually doesn't care, but he got asked to do it for the Dutch fans.
Maybe they realized it was called the Legends Drive?
Yeah.
And he does not meet that criteria.
I don't know. Have you seen that photo where he's exploding? It's pretty good.
That is pretty famous. Yeah, that's an all-time F1 photo. But yeah, so it's a funny story, just the degree to which so much of this does stem from the fact that Jos made kind of, there are a lot of good reasons to be pushing for Christian to step down and get the hell out of that team, but it is sort of a question as to whether that was really Jos's place to wade in and basically like tell any paper that would listen that the guy was an egomaniac taking the entire team down. Kind of left Max in a weird position here, and he just. And Jos just continues to haunt that garage like a shitty Banquo's ghost.
It's like what is it called? Palace politics or whatever.
Yeah.
except you've got Helmut Marko, Jos Verstappen, and Christian Horner, and all of them are pricks. Like none of them are like I don't know. They're just like different versions of the same egomaniac guy. Like I don't.
Oh, I'm increasingly convinced. Like the probably like most decent person among them, I'm increasingly convinced is Max.
Probably.
Like I think it is pretty clear, like the degree to which these guys are all completely out for themselves in all this,
and considering they're all his male, mentors for much of his life, it is remarkable that he maybe is. In fairness, I will say Max's post-race interview as well. He opened up the idea that he hadn't rewatched the final incident, and that maybe he will.
I did find that. Yeah. He did not argue he hadn't done anything wrong. He just he sort of admitted he had to watch the tape again. It can get confusing. It was like this team and that guy in particular are so vociferous whenever they feel they can sort of stand on principle on something. The fact he didn't, I think, kind of suggests, he doesn't want to break up Team Redline.
Right. Lando, on the other hand, was saying, will you talk to each other? And he was like, well, he has to talk to me because he has to apologize.
They were having the interview simultaneously.
Yeah, they were standing beside each other.
That's great.
Lando looks off screen, and then he finishes the interview. In the background of Max's interview, you see Lando storm off. And it is after Lando's interview, that's where Max says, obviously we should talk, but I think we need to let it lie for a little bit. Just a weird, Lando just going off heated a few feet away from his buddy. Yeah, weird situation. Good times.
Will we have good times at Silverstone, Danny?
Hopefully. We've had 74 years of good
My
times
God.
There. Not since it was the first in 1850 when farmers riding cattle.
It's like the meme picture of the future with the flying cars and the glass buildings and everything. But turns out that was just England in the 1800s.
Silverstone's a classic race, man, in every sense of the word. 1950, it was the venue for the first ever Formula One race in 1950. The track has gone under multiple changes in those 74 years, originally based around the runways and exterior roadways of an RAF base that was used during World War II. Like many other tracks around Europe, that's where it started, and it was 1947 when they first started racing on it. 1950 was when F1 came. The current version of the track is 5.9 kilometers, about 3.7 miles. It's 52 laps. Super high speed corners. This is just like the drivers liken it to be. This is the most like you're flying a jet plane circuit on the calendar. Just loads of medium to high speed corners. Really only one slow corner in the entire, or maybe two in the entire race circuit. There are 2 DRS straights, but plenty of other straightaways where you can get a decent amount of speed entering into those DRS spots. Lots of famous moments over the years as well. Of course, the first ever Grand Prix in 1950. Senna hitching a ride from Nigel Mansell in 1991 after his car ran out of fuel on the start finish. I think he finished 4th that year. Mansell's iconic overtake of Nelson Piquet, the little deacon move that he did in 1987. Schumacher and Hill crashing in the title battle where Damon Hill was trying to win his first title. Schumacher did eventually end up winning that year in 1995, but Damon Hill would get his first Drivers' Championship in 96. This is also where Schumacher won from the pit lane, which we've talked about in the past.
Yeah,
because
the finish line continues into the pit lane.
So he served his drive-through penalty by driving through on the final lap of the race. Absolutely hilarious. I read the rule book more than you motherfuckers.
The Schumacher era is so hard to explain to anyone who, you know what I mean? Like in the context of modern F1, it was like, so there's this guy and we let him do all this shit.
Absolutely mad. Hamilton won his first British GP here in 2008, the year he won his first championship. And of course, more recent years, the collision between Hamilton and Verstappen around turn 9, an infamous crash. Horner said you'd never overtake around there, but that's nonsense. There's tape of plenty of people overtaking around there. Just maybe the two of them shouldn't overtake around there.
Well, looking forward to this weekend, we've got on qualifying day 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 Celsius at the warmest part of the day. Precipitation at qualifying time looks to be about 5%, but a decent amount of wind. We got 15 miles an hour or 24 kilometers an hour out of the west. On race day, however, slightly cooler, 63 Fahrenheit, 17 Celsius. Wind, a little, much lower, 10 miles an hour, 16 kilometers an hour. Precipitation, though, 33%.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We love a wet Silverstone. We love a wet anything, you know? I love a wet anything. It's true. But Silverstone, for sure.
Heading into this weekend, the driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen is on top with 237 points. Lando Norris, of course, took a big hit. He now has 156, still has 156 rather, but Max is pulling ahead. Charles Leclerc is in third place with 150. Carlos Sainz in fourth with 135. Sergio Perez in fifth with 118. We've got Oscar Piastri in sixth with 212. George Russell 211. There are some tight battles going on here. Lewis Hamilton is in eighth with 85 points. Fernando Alonso in ninth with 41. And Yuki Tsunoda in 10th with 19. And we've got Stroll with 17. Hulkenberg has 14 points in 12th place. Ricciardo is in 13th place with 11 points. Oliver Behrman still hanging in there with 6 points, tied with Pierre Gasly. Magnussen has 5. Ocon has 3. Albon has 2. And then Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, and Logan Sargent all have 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 355 points to Ferrari's number 2 spot, 291 points. McLaren is in third with 268. Mercedes in fourth with 196. Then we've got Aston Martin in fifth with 58 points. RB has 30. Gene Haas and team now have 19 points.
Yeah.
Alpine is in eighth with 9. Williams has 2. And Sauber has 0. If you would like to join the standings yourself, you can do so using the link in the show notes to join our official Shift+F1 Fantasy League. The podium from the Austrian Grand Prix, we have Honda Power with 3 R's, tied with Car of Accounts. Okay.
Okay.
And then first place from Austria, McDonald's Crocs F1 team. Boy, the race suits, I'll bet, look great. But overall, the podium looks like this. In third place, Hosterclass in Motion. Hosterclass. Second place, The Fast of Us Part 2.
Nice.
And then in first place, RB's We Have the Meats.
So good.
You can hit us up with an email. If you like, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. We're also on the socials you can find in the show notes. That is us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
I'm especially excited to do it this time as I am in family's house, and I think that there are a number of children asleep right now, so let's do it. Let's race around the world. Yeah.
MotoGP is at the Sachsenring in Oberlungwitz, Germany.
Oberlungwitz in Saxony. Ooh.
Yeah. Formula 2 and Formula 3 will be supporting Formula 1 this weekend.
As they were last weekend. We didn't even talk about any of that. We'll talk about that next week, maybe. Who knows?
We also have DTM.
Oh, I watched some DTM over the weekend, actually. I was in the European mood with the Euros are on as well in Germany.
Yeah. I see. Is they are in Nürnberg at the Norris Ring.
My favorite ring, yeah.
The NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the Chicago Street Course in Chicago, Illinois for the Loop 110.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's better than the Detroit street race or the other street race.
The World Rallycross Championship is in, oh boy, Holius Motorstadion in Sweden for the World Rallycross of Sweden.
That sounds like somebody made up something in Swedish.
Yeah, they're just doing that to confuse me. The Repco Supercars are in Townsville.
Oh yeah,
One of my favorite place names on earth.
It's right up there with Cityland.
Yep. The Motocross Grand Prix of Lombok. We're again in Indonesia
Nice.
this weekend. The Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio is this weekend at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course in Lexington, OH. And we got NASCAR. Also on the great streets of Chicago for the Grant Park 165.
These pizzas are rather deep.
And Formula One. What do you know? Friday, July 5th, Free Practice 1. Things kick off at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPNU, followed by Free Practice 2 at 11 a.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Then Saturday, July 6th, Free Practice 3 is at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2. But the race, everyone, Sunday, July 7th, 10 a.m. on ESPN2. The Deuce.
Outstanding.
That's right. But that's what's going on this weekend, Danny. What happened today?
Today in 1966, Jacques Brabham won the French Grand Prix at Reims. It was the first win for the former world champion since 1960 Portuguese Grand Prix, but it was the first time ever that a driver had won a world championship race in a car bearing his own name. Indeed, the only other man to have achieved such a feat since is Brabham's one-time teammate, Bruce McLaren. The race was also the debut event for British driver Mike Parkes. He was an engineer and reserve driver at Ferrari and had been promoted to the race team after John Surtees walked out. He immediately proved his credentials by finishing second, one of the best ever debuts for an F1 driver. That is fantastic. Wow. John Surtees walks out. That's like something out of like a cartoon where like the driver walks out and then the team principal turns to the engineers and goes, "Do any of you know how to drive the car?" And steps forward Mike Parkes, who did the job. I mean, he was also their reserve driver, but still. Pretty cool. Awesome. Good job. Parked it on the podium.
Well, we got to the end, everyone. We made it. Final thoughts, Danny. You look like you could go to sleep.
Yeah, thanks. I'm both hungry and tired, and I won't say jet lagged. I've had 2 transatlantic flights in the past 2 weeks. This was only just across the country, so this was fine. But I do smell like airplane, and I think playing NASCAR Heat for about 5 hours actually did prepare me pretty well for this. And then driving to Rhode Island from Logan Airport, so I was sort of in a car mood, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, I know Rob is into a lot of the, the drama. I am too. I get it, but part of me just wants the racing to be good and for this not to turn into another soap opera like 2021. Well, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I feel like the Red Bull is probably going to be pretty nippy around Silverstone as well.
And final thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, but McLaren's such a fast car in a straight line, and like there are decent straights there. I think like 2 quick things. We forgot in our race around the world, Tour de France. It's happening.
Wow, you're right.
It's incredible racing all around France. Now, I'm going to say this, but apparently there are no more mountain stages for about a week, so it's not going to be the most exciting thing if you're going to tune in for the next week. Like, I love open countryside, but like the flat stages really are boring. Nothing like nobody seems to give a shit. Like maybe it used to be different, but like nothing seems to happen. But they also, when they started the tour in Italy, and I look up, and they're like, and now they're entering the town of Imola. And then I look up, and I'm like, I see a guardrail, and then I'm like, huh, is that the track over there? Are they racing outside the track? And then the camera pulls back and looks forward as they go over a candy-striped curb. And no, they took the entire tour through Imola.
What? The track?
Cool.
Yes.
Oh my God. That's
Dude,
cool.
it was awesome. And also, like,
That is amazing.
It really brought out the scale of an F1 track, because we only see cars on it, right? The way it swallowed the entire peloton. Like, it was just like all the riders in the Tour de France didn't even come close to like filling up the straight. Like, it was just such a small like cadre of drivers relative to the size of Imola. But it was really neat. It was sort of a beautiful moment, and it was just sort of cool seeing the track in different context. On a day where the only racing was cycle racing.
They should have sent them up on the banking for fun. The old bank they have, that like insane one.
That's Monza.
That is Monza. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
So no, they didn't. They like no banking. But they did. The sketchiest part was they didn't really have a good exit from the tracks. They just had to all like file through the service vehicle entrance to the pit lane. And so, like, it got pretty gnarly there. As they basically had to make a series of like tight turns that seemed like they were best negotiated by like a panel van, a single panel van.
I mean, half the time I turned on that first day, it was like the first day they ever started the Tour de France with a mountain stage or whatever. And when they were at the top of one of those towns, I love those shots of like there's basically like room for 2 bikes, and then it's just people clapping them. Like, but they've only made space for like 1 or 2 bikes to get through. It's absolutely crazy. What a mad sport.
Yeah, it's a blast. I've been completely addicted to it this year. And last thing is, I think everyone's overthinking it. Like, I think, look, Sainz is going to be able to make up his mind whenever he plays this because he's the best. Like, he's the surest thing on the market right now. Mm-hmm. I kind of, as they were pulling into the 3 positions at the end of the race, I was kind of like, man, Mercedes is just overthinking it. Like, they just hire that guy. I think it's just they don't want to be seen like, well, if he wasn't good enough Ferrari and they took Lewis, we're not going to take the downgrade. But I think that's ego. Like,
yeah,
from the standpoint of like what's probably the surest bet, like just plug him into a car.
Yeah, agreed. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. And if you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.